Hey everyone, this is Matt Kinsman, Head of Content at Connectiv. Thanks again for joining us today for Making Sense of Marketing's Alphabet Soup. Today we'll be clarifying some of the most important terms and acronyms in digital marketing, looking at how 4 of those most prominent terms, artificial intelligence and machine learning, customer data platform, and account-based marketing complement each other, and how they can become an effective part of your digital marketing strategy today. Our speaker is AnnMarie Wills, who is the principal of LeverageLab. AnnMarie is a pioneer in evolving audience development practices. During her career, AnnMarie has conceptualized, built, and launched numerous data products for notable companies like Penton Media, Knight Ridder, Source Media, and Vance Publishing. With that, I'll turn it over to AnnMarie.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm really thrilled to be here, and thanks for giving us an hour of your time to talk about some of the most important terms and technologies that you need to know. So just a quick introduction about LeverageLab, my company. Fundamentally, we help media organizations maximize their first-party data opportunity, and that takes a lot of different forms. For some, it's actually organizing and building the first-party data. For some, it's productizing that data into new revenue streams. And for some, it's ensuring the longevity of the data through modernizing their audience operations. So let's dig in. In the marketing for this presentation, there were several key acronyms that were sort of thrown out as things we'd like to cover. So I'm going to cover about 5 of those really quickly here. And then we're going to dig in on 4 of those acronyms and get a little closer to them and sort of dispel some of the myths and sort of add a little bit more clarity to some things that are a little bit confusing. So unfortunately, my little builds aren't working here because I had a really slick little visualization here of the 5 terms that we're going to cover now. And the first one is PA, which is page authority. And page authority is very closely linked to another acronym, which is DA, domain authority. And essentially, these are SEO, search engine optimization terms, and these are measures that were developed by a company called Moz. And Moz is basically the de facto standard for metrics about SEO. And they have a really robust knowledge base if you want to learn more about SEO. So page authority is basically a predictive score. It's a score that's based 1 to 100. And it predicts the strength of the individual page to actually appear in search results. And sometimes you'll hear it referred to as appearing in SERP, S-E-R-P, which is search engine result pages. So that's what PA means. Now DA, domain authority, is also a prediction, but it's predicting the strength of the domain and all the subdomains that live under it to appear in search. So those are 2 really quick terms that we can cover. And the next we're going to talk about is cost per engagement, CPE. This is actually a trademarked acronym and term, and it was trademarked by a company called Social Mecca in 2006. This is basically a performance measure and an advertising revenue model similar to CPM. So this is basically seen in advertising models where an action is created, a click, a download. You can vote something up, or you can, there's always going to be some sort of action involved. So that is CPE. The next we're going to cover is cost per acquisition, which is also sometimes called cost per action. This, again, is a performance-based advertising revenue model. Pay for advertising only when an action is created, just very similar sounding to cost per engagement. The differences here are that cost per engagement sort of lives in the Facebook lexicon. That is a term that is used in Facebook advertising, so it's the place where you're going to see that more. Other platforms and other models use cost per acquisition and cost per action. This is also, cost per action and cost per acquisition is also something that is obviously sort of in the purview of the direct marketers. I'm sorry, not just direct marketers, but I'm sorry, I've lost my notes. So this is not just a direct marketing term, but people that are direct response marketers are very much aligned with the cost per acquisition, cost per action metric, because obviously it puts more of the emphasis on the advertiser to perform. So it's a great model for them to use. The next we're going to cover is the DMP, and we're going to get a bonus acronym out of this one on the demand side platform, or the DSP. So the data management platform and the demand side platform are two pieces of the advertising technology ecosystem, and they sit on the demand side. And what that means is, in the programmatic space, you've got people who are demanding the advertising. They are looking for those are the folks who desire to advertise. And then there's the supply side. Those are the folks that have the real estate and have the audience. So really, a DMP, a data management platform, and a DSP sort of work together. The DMP provides a wide array of targeting data that it can offer via the marketplace. It also aggregates an advertiser's data. So you can put your data into the mix, and that allows you to do things like lookalike modeling, and it's really a valuable tool set for acquisition-focused marketing efforts. The DSP becomes the technology that actually executes a campaign, that is used to execute a campaign. It sort of sucks in the targeting data, and then that is used in the execution of a campaign. Now, the next quick term we're going to cover here is earned media value, or an earned media value index. This is sometimes referred to as the Azenberg index, because it was developed by an ad agency, essentially, called Azenberg. And what Azenberg's trying to do with the earned media value index is it's trying to assign a benchmark value for actions that are happening in the earned media space. So things like all the social platforms and the blogs. And when I say the social platforms, I mean organic use of those social platforms, not the paid use of those social platforms. So essentially, what they're trying to provide is sort of what sort of value does an organization get from the use of these earned media platforms and earned media tactics. So as you can imagine, each platform has its own set of metrics, and they have their own values based on things that happen in that platform. So like things like a follow or a retweet in Twitter versus a share and a like in Facebook, those are all going to have different values based on the platform and the metrics and performance within that platform. So that's just five acronyms that we've covered really quickly. Now, what I'd like to do next is sort of dig in and get some focus around a few different acronyms, and maybe even dispel some of the misconceptions or misunderstanding about some of these. The first that we're going to talk about is artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I didn't go with a picture of a thinking robot in my slide to cover artificial intelligence and machine learning, because I thought, this kind of wonky Venn diagram actually tells a story. It tells a story that artificial intelligence is essentially a very broad concept, and machine learning lives within that concept. Just the other day, I was reading an article, and it was the gentleman that was writing the article was a tech VC, and he essentially had a kind of running bet with his team that during the course of 2016, every tech company that was coming in to pitch them, they would literally write a check on the spot during that pitch if they heard somebody not include the mention of artificial intelligence or machine learning in their pitch. And shockingly, they didn't write a single check last year. The problem is that we got kind of like a branding crisis, and there's sort of a ton of confusion that is circulating around artificial intelligence and machine learning, and sort of where is the line drawn. So what I'm trying to really get across here is that artificial intelligence is a broader concept, and it's a concept that basically the premise is that machines should be able to carry out smart tasks. And then within the concept of artificial intelligence lives machine learning. Machine learning is an application of artificial intelligence. So, when we hear Elon Musk say things like, we're having an existential crisis, there's a potential existential crisis around artificial intelligence, what we're really talking about is sort of the idea that there is no governance or regulation at this point around the use of artificial intelligence. And so as it progresses, there is certainly an idea that there's some fear that, machines could sort of pose a potential threat. So the idea about machines rising up and taking over, like Westworld, it's really more about a lack of sort of oversight, governance, regulation, and maybe rogue development than it is the actual technologies. Because the truth is that all aspects of artificial intelligence have rules-based systems to them. There are rules that are created by humans, and so, essentially, the idea that they could take over is really sort of an existential threat rather than a true threat at this point. So let's move on to a little broader concept around machine learning. I think of all the terms that we're talking about, or the two terms that we're talking about here, artificial intelligence and machine learning is the one that we're seeing the most application of. We're seeing a ton of application of within point solutions that we're all looking at in terms of technologies that we're making decisions around. So let's talk about machine learning. There's really two kinds of machine learning. There's something called unsupervised learning, and then there's something called supervised learning. And of those two types, there are three essential possible outputs, if you will. There's clustering, there's classification, and there's regression. So the reason that you've got the difference between unsupervised and supervised learning is because if you look at the arrows and the way that they point, essentially clustering and unsupervised learning is based only on input data. So it's a one-way street. Supervised learning requires input and output. So it's basically the idea that it's learning from the data that it's analyzing. So supervised learning, let's dig into that a little bit more. Like I said, it requires a set of data, and then there are algorithms that are built that it can learn from that data. So most, and not so, but most of the machine learning that takes place in most of the point solutions that we work with are actually within this realm. They're within the supervised learning world. You can have the input and the output, and if you want to think of it in an analogy, think of it like a teacher who is giving the input, overseeing a learning process for the students, which is the output. As the teacher teaches, they correct bad inferences, they dispel myths, they, help people internalize the information. And that's a very good analogy around supervised learning because there's input and output. So clustering in the unsupervised learning space, again, this is based on data that's just input data. So clustering, and you could use the term segmentation, is sort of like categorizing, which is a very useful type of tool, and we're going to talk about some of those applications here in a second. Classification means that the final output is sort of categorical. It's red versus blue. We see a disease, we see no disease. We bid on an ad space, we don't bid on an ad space. And then regression is sort of measuring things on a scale of likelihood, like likelihood to vote or a content topical affinity or some sort of personalized pricing. So those are just sort of a little bit more explanation of the different types of machine learning. Now thinking about common applications for that, looking over here around chatbots, there's a lot of conversation about chatbots, but chatbots are really a machine learning exercise. For instance, if they're used in a customer service application, let's say someone's working with a chatbot to get more information about a potential product that they want to buy. They may say, is this available in yellow? And the chatbot is programmed to say, no, it's available in red and blue. And humans being what we are, we say, okay, is it available in yellow? If the chatbot doesn't use machine learning and take into account the input that it's receiving, it's just going to keep saying, no, it's red and blue. in that scenario, the chatbot with a machine learning sort of algorithm built into it would then recognize that it needs a different response. It says, no, not available in yellow. So anyway, third-party chatbots are springing up everywhere, and I'm sure all of us have had an experience with those. There's an underlying sort of enabling technology that's needed in order to build a chatbot. I've seen a couple of YouTube videos not too long ago of just like 12-year-old kids building chatbots. And fundamentally, you can build a really serviceable chatbot with very little effort. But to build one that truly learns from its experience, there's some serious technology that needs to be involved. And then there's lots of, under the native line, you can see in our daily lives applications of chatbots. Siri fundamentally is a chatbot. Another application of artificial intelligence, machine learning, is the idea of dynamic pricing. So, I've got an example of that with our little Uber screen grab here that's showing you 6.2x New Year's Eve surge pricing, which is always fun to see. But that's fundamentally an analysis of data from an input. So this is more on the unsupervised learning sort of realm, because it's analyzing behaviors and patterns that are happening within a set of input data. That means, what's happening within the Uber application, and then responding with an output. So that's a good example. And then on the idea of recommendations and content curation, you see it constantly within, applications like Amazon and Facebook and Twitter and all of our platforms, social platforms, because they're trying to provide you with content that is similar to, the content consumption that you are already showing within those applications. And then I just kind of stole a little example of sort of how it all translates down into a personalization from one of our clients here, which is Newsweek. So underlying this little example of an on-screen personalization is an affinity model that is identifying individuals who are specifically interested in information about Donald Trump. They also have similar kind of approaches around things like NASA and information about the royal family. So once a content affinity has been identified within the users of that media source, then a content affinity around, let's say, Donald Trump or around information about NASA, they are then put into a specific segmentation that they then receive personalized messaging throughout their experience on the site and off. So that's just a little bit about here we got a question about unsupervised learning. So I'm not sure if that came in before I talked about the applications, but again, unsupervised learning and really the way that you see that utilized in an application is in the analysis of a set of data. So it's looking for trends. It's looking for some sort of way to classify the information that it's receiving in the input. And I'm using sort of the Uber example as an example of unsupervised learning, because essentially it's identifying this trend that, oh my gosh, there's so much need for Uber pickups and it's New Year's Eve, we're going to go ahead and up that pricing because we've reached a certain threshold, a rule that some human identified, and now it's time to up the pricing. So that's a good example of unsupervised learning ending up in an application. Okay, cool. So now we're going to talk about CDP, because I know we hear that acronym a lot, and I just want to kind of talk about some of the, kind of key hallmarks of what a CDP system does and what its key functions are. It's the idea, these four key functions are basically sort of where CDPs start. So the idea that they combine data from multiple data sources is sort of an inherent hallmark of that type of technology. The idea that it can reconcile identities across all those data stores is also, like a key capability. And it's doing that against data that's found online with the online experience, and then offline data as well. And then the idea that you can build segmentation yourself, this would be, not an unsupervised machine learning exercise, but this would be the idea that a human being could go in, address the system, interrogate the data, and create their own segment. And then potentially have data science capabilities to create segments themselves, sort of organically within the system. All of that's creating actionable consumer segmentation that can then be used by the fourth function, which is to action that data. And action that data by having multiple integrations with channels that you can use. And through those channels, you can power a very specific personalized message based on your segmentation. So these are kind of the big key functions that a CDP system provides. Now, just as a little bit of an example and putting it into a visual representation, fundamentally down here in this bottom bar, you've got all these different types of data stores. You've got data that comes from your web or mobile experience. You've got maybe a content management system. You could have an e-commerce platform. You could have a CRM system. In our industry, you may have a fulfillment system. Or you could have an email marketing platform or a marketing automation platform. The list goes on and on and on and on. So all of those data stores, their data sits in a siloed environment. And we have always struggled with how do we sort of assimilate or assemble that data and then use it in a very actionable way. So the CDP system lays across it like a veneer and then sort of slurps the data up. I know that's not a terribly technical term, but I like it. So it slurps the data up into the CDP system where all those key functions, of reconciling the identity, the segmentation, all of that exists in that CDP environment. So you've got the ability to, like it's showing here, cross-channel profiles, get content preferences, build out personas, and then also has its own analytics. So then it does that last piece of that key functionality, which is then connect via all of the marketing channels so that data can be actioned, via, again, the website or the mobile experience, through an email platform, through some sort of ad platform or demand-side platform. We just got that acronym earlier, or through a social platform. So just a little visual representation of kind of what those key functionalities are. So I'm also going to bring in that DMP acronym because fundamentally, the CDP sort of grew out of the data management platform. And the reason they sort of took off and did their own thing was because the needs were different. There were different sets of needs that had to be served. On the data management platform side, I think I mentioned when we were talking about the acronyms that it's really very acquisition focused. It's a place for a marketer to get targeting data that's really important for, a specific set of demographics that they want to serve or get advertising in front of or acquire. So it's a great way to access that targeting data. But it's not a great tool if you want to activate your first-party data. So that is that's kind of a sort of a negative. I mean, the data goes in. You can pull your first-party data, particularly online, into the DMP system, but it's being shared in a shared environment potentially. So I think of it as sort of an equalizer. It's a great tool, but when you're using it, you're sort of on an equal playing field with many other marketers. Now, on the CDP side, what it really allows you to do is start to think about retention as your primary objective. And we all know that, working to retain and improve customer experience with existing people is a cheaper, way to build business. So not saying that acquisition isn't important, but the CDP allows you to really do both, but its primary focus is around retention. Also, that first-party data, it's all your data. So it is living within your data environment, never shared, and then you've got, essentially the opportunity to sort of differentiate yourself, to use your own data in highly creative ways, to segment, to market, to, engage your user base. So now we talked about sort of how the system, that set of key features and functions that need to be in place for it to really sort of live in the CDP category. But now we're going to talk about how these technologies sort of can differentiate themselves, different pieces of functionality or features that they can have that make them different from each other. So when you, as a marketer are thinking critically about the CDP category, you can say, maybe these are some questions that I can use to sort of get a better sense of how one system behaves versus another, and what are the key differentiators and maybe value propositions of one system versus another. So one of the key sort of important differences is around identity resolution. And so the questions are really about how does that data come together? How do you build that singular profile of an individual within the CDP system? What is the methodology behind that? The next is around sort of predictive analytics and machine learning. Again, here's a point solution, and we're talking about how does machine learning or predictive analytics sort of how does it manifest itself within the system? A lot of the CDPs can create segments and predictive models, and they're using things like machine learning to create those models, those segments. So an example of that would be, within my system, I can, my point solution, my CDP, will help me identify people that are at risk to churn or who are highly engaged with my overall enterprise. So those are some of the things that can sort of make themselves, differentiate from system to system. The last would be sort of around the idea of personalization or maybe even orchestration. Some CDPs have the ability to sort of orchestrate an entire campaign because remember, we're pulling all our data together in one environment, and then we're able to action that data by, through segmentation and then through the marketing channel. So how does that happen? What's the model for that? Is it, sort of a straight campaign, or can I build an orchestrated campaign? These would be some of the questions that you could sort of pose to the different vendors and technologies in that space. Okay. So now we've covered kind of two big ones. So we're going to talk about ABM. And ABM, or account-based marketing, it's almost sort of a philosophical definition, but there are some basic kind of tones to the definition. There's a lot of different philosophy around the execution of account-based marketing. But in general, it's the idea of sort of flipping the funnel. In the old days, we think about in the yellow here sort of the idea of traditional demand generation. It's sort of putting a lot of stuff in the top of the funnel, buying some good databases, doing a lot of outbound marketing until some people, raise their hand and say, hey, I'm interested in that. And then we say, okay, cool, we're going to nurture you until you become a lead. And then, it's sort of that one-to-one model. And this works super great when you've got an individual making a decision about something. So you've got one person in the organization that has all the power, all the budget, and can make the final decision. But that isn't reality in a lot of organizational cases, and certainly in some categories of business. It's a very matrix decision. Think about a hospital making a decision about an EMR system, electronic medical record system. There's another acronym. So thinking about an EMR system, they've got so many inputs and so many stakeholders and so many, decision points around making that kind of a technological shift within their organization that there clearly isn't one person who's ultimately going to make the decision. There's a lot of people in that kind of matrix account, that are going to have input on that. So account-based marketing is saying, hey, let's flip the funnel. Let's talk about sort of identifying the key accounts, and then identifying the individuals, the contacts within that account, and then providing very targeted, very tailored content along a nurtured path to allow everyone from the manager who's going to have their hands on the system all the way up to the chairman of the board or CFO or CEO to get the information that they need in order to, make the decision that they have to make. And then the ultimate opportunity is the conversion of that account. So that's the kind of basic definition, the idea that you're fishing with nets. When you're doing traditional lead generation or traditional demand generation versus fishing with a spear. And some people would say it's like, marketing the way we used to do it. And that's true. Technology had a huge impact that allowed things like demand generation and sort of, tremendously scaled lead generation to even happen. So there is a bit of the old is new again in the idea of account-based marketing. So why is it hot? What's the deal there? So for marketers, there's some real efficiencies here. So inbound lead gen, the idea that you can just buy the database, do the marketing, it's just becoming less and less efficient. And ultimately, it just can't support a really matrixed or complex or long-term deal, long time frame type of deal. The other reason it's getting hot is because all of the elements are in place. The technology is there, the data is there, the ability to personalize is there, the analytics are there. So why shouldn't we be moving in that direction? And then the other thing is kind of an interesting just phenomenon. So when the kind of demand gen world started to blossom after, shortly after the launch of things like marketing automation tools, it really forced and enabled sort of synchronization between sales and marketing. Because in order for account-based marketing to really work, it's not just a marketing thing. It's not just marketing filling up the funnel and then kicking everything out into Salesforce and then they pick it up and then they do what they do. It's a really synchronized idea. And because of demand generation and being reliant on sort of lead sourcing from the marketing team, there's already a bit of synchronization happening there. So it just kind of makes sense that account-based marketing would be sort of the next evolution. Now for publishers, why is it a big deal? It's a big deal because advertisers are asking about it. They're asking, how can you support our account-based marketing initiatives? And that's kind of a big deal, so you need to get out in front of it. The other thing that makes it hot for publishers is, hey, you know what? We own the audiences. We have this depth and this breadth of audience contact information. So if there's like 10 or 20 or 100 or 1,000 companies that you're really those are the only people that you're interested in, if we serve that audience well, we should be able to represent a good chunk of those potential contacts that live within that organization. And if not, it's kind of baked into our DNA, another acronym, in the publishing industry to be able to source that data well. So, things are lining up for the publishers to provide this type of this offering. So the other thing that they have that makes it really, really hot and a great opportunity if you're able to harness the data is the ability to provide these audience insights. Baked into the concept of account-based marketing is the idea that you're providing extremely targeted, relevant content to an individual within a matrix organization that's specific to how they need to make their decisions. So that can look very different if the person's a CFO versus, like I said, a departmental manager. Even the type of content that's going to resonate with them is going to be different. The topics are going to be different. Everything really fundamentally should be different, and that's the kind of one of the core premise of account-based marketing. So who can know that kind of insight better than the publisher who's serving the informational needs of the marketplace? The key is being able to harness that first-party data of consumption and turn that into insights and then find a way to deliver that to the publishers. We're seeing with our clients where they're able to really eke out additional value in the account-based marketing sort of product development process is in harnessing that audience insight. It turns things from, 5-figure deals into 6-figure deals. And then the last is just what I'm talking about here, 6-figure deals, it's about the money, the opportunity for developing a whole new line of product, a whole new revenue stream. It's really there. It's real and it's there. And then, honestly, it allows the publishing industry, our industry, to leverage, what we do really, really well. And that is serve content to an audience and meet their needs from a content perspective. So again, it just kind of makes sense. So one of the things I think that's really interesting about account-based marketing as well is that it's sort of like bringing together some of the things that we were talking about today. It's bringing together point solutions that allow us to generate insights and, do good content recommendation, hit the marketplace through multiple channels, deploy these campaign tactics both on the site and off the site that sort of nurture that, matrixed organization and all of the levels of decision making together. So the pieces of technology or the concepts that we talked about today, CDP, artificial intelligence and machine learning, and then the kind of undercurrent is always about the data. For me, ABM sort of brings it all together. It's a way to, bring some wildly diverse, concepts and acronyms together in one really profitable, wonderful revenue stream. So that is essentially everything that I'm covering today. Matt, do we want to open it up for any more questions?
Yes, definitely, folks. At this point, we can certainly answer your questions. You can submit questions by selecting the Q&A tab in the lower left-hand corner of your screen and typing your questions in. You can address that to all recipients or to AnnMarie. AnnMarie, while we're waiting for folks to type in some questions, I actually had a couple questions for you. And
Great.
In terms of AI, I think a lot of publishers feel like this isn't applicable to them, or they're not able to really leverage AI or machine learning at this point. Are there any examples you can point to of publishers, hopefully B2B publishers, but really any publishers, whether it's B2B or consumer, who are really using AI or machine learning either to build out their sales funnel or to make some content decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I was just at a conference a couple of weeks ago and saw a presentation by S&W, which is fundamentally a consumer publisher, but they and it stands for Farmers and Writers, S&W. So they're very niche, sort of crafts and lifestyle. Like they have many publications around, teaching people to write screenplays and, teaching people how to do art of various types. So incredibly niche, incredibly lifestyle oriented, but they were talking about how they had built a machine learning platform basically off of Watson. So I don't know if you guys have heard of IBM Watson, but IBM Watson is basically a powerhouse that allows people, developers, individuals, to sort of harness the power of machine learning and take into their machine learning modeling a variety of sort of public data sources. So what they're building are basically sort of like little plugins that you can use, you can plug into and use in the applications that you build. So they had actually used a piece of Watson's platform to analyze content. So natural language pattern matching is a machine learning exercise. It's a categorization type of output. And so it allowed them to essentially better organize their content and then build a recommendation engine. So as people were hitting, let's say a crocheting magazine, they were also building out a whole set of recommendations based on who that person is from a person lifestyle perspective and all the data that they knew about them, but also behaviors that were happening around content consumption on their site. So that was a pretty cool exercise with somebody using machine learning in a very organic and native way. But I think the best way to think about how to use machine learning, and if somebody drops by, your CEO drops by your desk and says, hey, what are we doing for machine learning these days? Start looking at your point solution providers, because the point solution providers are the ones that are, really thinking about how does my application, how does what we do from a technology perspective, how can we integrate machine learning and provide a better technology performance? So I think that's the best way to start thinking about how machine learning can be used in your organization. And then, there's some creative thinking about, how do I use this to, this newfound artificial intelligence and machine learning capability? How do I talk about it? And, and I think that's kind of the easiest route.
Okay, terrific. We had a question that is in now asking about staffing changes or skill changes that a publisher needs to consider when starting to move in this direction. And I'd actually like to set that question up by asking you another one around organization when you're starting to really move into a lot of these tech-based marketing initiatives, who owns this? I mean, is this really collaboration between the audience side, marketing, the digital media side, the sales side? How do you really organize this effectively so you can start chasing down these solutions? We had heard of the head of digital media at a B2B publisher recently said, well, audience should just become part of digital media. And I'm sure the audience folks have a different take on that, but how do you really start to set your company up to effectively go after some of these tech-based solutions?
Yeah, I don't think that that's far from the mark, though, that statement. I don't know that you necessarily just slide audience up under digital marketing, but fundamentally, when I was with Source Media and we had a CDP implementation, audience development owned the CDP system, and so it fundamentally powered account-based marketing. So the handshake between the sales organization, sort of marketing services organization, and the audience organization became so much deeper and longer. It became like a Donald Trump handshake that just lasts forever. So it was definitely, it put emphasis on the audience team to really, really understand sort of digital marketing and how to build effective campaigns in digital channels. And so it really put more of the onus of change, I would say, in that experience around the audience development team. But I think, kind of speaking about sort of what kind of skill changes and staffing changes need to take place, I think, from top down, well, let me say this differently. So there's definitely a need for sort of campaign knowledge, skill, and capability. Because as we talk about things like account-based marketing and, hey, I want to build an account-based marketing capability, we need to think outside of just the email channel, which is sort of the, heroin addiction that we all have in the publishing space. So, we need to start thinking multi-channel. We need to start thinking off-site and on-site, as long as we still really understand and deeply, deeply understand our audience. That's where the true value is. That's what we as a publisher, especially in the B2B space, it's the big intrinsic value that we provide to our marketplaces is, the contact with that audience. But yeah, we've seen pretty dramatic changes, honestly, in the types of skills and sort of the organizational structure of, a marketing services organization, and where does that overlap with an audience development team. But yeah, the skills are digitally facing. They lean on campaign skills very heavily. And, it's like being good generalized marketers, honestly, is the kind of skill set that you need to see in both that marketing services organization and in that audience team, in my opinion.
All right, terrific. Just a reminder for our audience, you can submit questions with the Q&A tab in the lower left-hand corner. If you have any questions about other terms that you'd like to get some definition or clarification on, or if you have some specific questions about either machine learning, CDP, or ABM. AnnMarie, while we're waiting for someone to type in, could you just give some pointers on how to really get started with this? I think for a lot of publishers, some are starting to go down the road with this. They've dabbled a little bit with CDPs. They may even be setting up their own ABM services. But if you're just starting down this road, what do you really need to have in place, either in terms of technology, specific positions, or if there's even some specific suggestions that you would have with either certain technologies or certain services that are already out there that can make this easier for publishers?
Yeah, so I just, in our experience, and what my company does is we help people make decisions around technology. So our point of view is that it's absolutely like mission critical to identify the use cases and how do you want to advance an ABM program. What does that look like for you philosophically? So if you're considering something like CDP, which CDP can be a transformational technology to get you into a place where you can create an ABM program, or it also can allow you to start taking advantage of machine learning and things like that to perform, a more personalized experience for your customer. So to me, the CDP can be sort of the kicking off point. That's the thing that sort of, can make all these things sort of happen. But it's absolutely setting yourself up for failure if you don't really hone in on what the use cases are. And when I say use case, what I'm talking about is like a real traditional sort of idea of a use case. This is an end result I want to have. So then you drill down into what are all the things that need to be in place in order for us to get to this end result. Like if the use case is I want to build an ABM program, well then, that'll give you a lot of insight into what features, functionalities, the things that need to be in place with the CDP system in order to fulfill my version of an account-based marketing program. So I think, getting started is getting super clear about where you're philosophically sitting. What do I want to get done? How do I want to bring things like ABM to market? And then that will help you with the next step, which is a technology step. And then it comes to the question, that we just received from the audience, and your question too is, what does it take then for me to transform my organization in order to take advantage of the opportunity? So it's it's kind of that classic people, process, technology thing.
Right. All right. Terrific. Well, AnnMarie, thank you very much. This has been an excellent presentation, and for our audience, you will all be receiving a recorded archive of the presentation. Before we sign off, I just want to bring your attention to our Business Media and Information Summit. That's going to be held November 13th and November 15th in Fort Lauderdale. We're going to be covering a lot of these topics, including setting up your sales and marketing organization, how to create an account-based marketing program, and AnnMarie, you're going to be speaking on our data track as well. Could you talk a little bit about that session, please?
Oh, I'm very excited about the data track, but I honestly am still waiting for sort of a little bit of a roundup with the leader of the pack there. So I'm gonna reserve any comments about what we're speaking to specifically. But honestly, the folks that have been recruited to be on the panel, and then the leader of the panel, Russell Perkins, you can't get a better conversation about actionable use of data within this space without having Russell Perkins involved. So it's going to be great.
All right, terrific. Well, folks, thanks again for joining us today, and AnnMarie, thank you very much. Nice job.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody.